When a teacher mocks a black girl in front of the entire class, no one expected her response would silence the room and expose the ugly truth of racism. The bell rang sharply, signaling the start of the first period at Greenville High. The students shuffled into their seats, still groggy from the early morning, their voices a hum of casual chatter. Among them was 15-year-old Alana Johnson, a quiet, studious girl who sat near the middle of the room, hoping to blend in as she always did. Her dark braids framed a face marked by a quiet resilience, a resilience shaped by a lifetime of navigating the subtle and not-so-subtle realities of being one of the few black students in the school. Today's class was history, taught by Mr. Reardon, a middle-aged man with a commanding voice and a reputation for being brutally honest. Some admired his no-nonsense teaching style, but others saw the cracks in his approach, the biting sarcasm, the way his words sometimes veered too close to personal attacks, and his uncanny ability to single out the most vulnerable student in the room. "All right, everyone," Mr. Reardon said, clapping his hands for attention. "Let's see who's actually been paying attention to the Civil War unit." He scanned the room with a smirk, his eyes darting between students. They all knew what was coming. He loved these moments of putting someone on the spot. His gaze landed on Alana. Her stomach dropped. "Alana," he said, drawing out her name with a mocking lilt. "Let's see what you've got. Tell me, why do you think the South fought so hard to preserve slavery?" A hush fell over the class. Alana's classmates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't the question itself that bothered them. It was the way he asked it. The emphasis he placed on "you" carried an unspoken accusation, a challenge. Alana took a breath, her heart racing. She wasn't unprepared. She had studied the material carefully, as always. But the weight of being the only black girl in the room, and now the subject of everyone's focus, made it hard to think. "I think it was about preserving their way of life," she began cautiously, her voice steady but soft. "Preserving their way of life," Mr. Reardon repeated, his tone dripping with condescension. He paced dramatically to the front of the room, turning to face the class as if Alana had delivered the most ridiculous answer he'd ever heard. "And what exactly does that mean, Alana? You're black. You should understand this better than anyone." A collective gasp rippled through the room. A few students glanced at Alana, their expressions ranging from disbelief to discomfort. Others stared at their desks, too afraid or unsure to react. Alana felt heat rise to her face. The humiliation hit her like a wave, the sting of his words sinking in. She wanted to disappear, to shrink into her seat and avoid the eyes of her peers. But instead, something inside her stirred, an ember of anger and defiance that refused to be extinguished. Mr. Reardon pressed on, oblivious to, or perhaps relishing, the tension in the room. "Come on, Alana. Surely you can give us a more insightful answer than that. Or is this topic too uncomfortable for you to handle?" The class was silent. All eyes were on Alana now, waiting to see how she would respond. Her mind raced. She could stay silent, let him have his moment of superiority, and move on with the lesson. But the thought of letting his words go unchecked, of allowing herself to be humiliated without standing up, made her grip her pencil tightly. She straightened in her chair, lifting her chin slightly. For the first time, her voice rose above the tension in the room. "Maybe it's uncomfortable," she said, meeting Mr. Reardon's gaze with steady determination, "because you're asking me to explain a system that was built to oppress people like me. Maybe it's uncomfortable because you're more interested in mocking me than actually teaching this class." The air in the room grew thick. Mr. Reardon's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of something else. Disbelief, annoyance, or maybe even fear. The students sat frozen, their eyes darting between Alana and the teacher. Before Mr. Reardon could recover, Alana continued, her voice steady and clear. "You think that because I'm black, I should have all the answers about slavery. But maybe you should ask yourself why you think it's okay to single me out because of my skin color." The classroom was dead silent now. Even the hum of the fluorescent light seemed to fade as Alana's words hung in the air. For the first time, Mr. Reardon didn't have a quick comeback. His lips parted slightly as if to respond, but no words came. Alana felt her heart pounding, but she didn't look away. She held her ground, refusing to shrink back into the shadows. Finally, Mr. Reardon cleared his throat, straightened his tie, and turned back to the board. "Let's move on," he muttered, his voice tight. But the class wasn't moving on, not in their minds at least. Alana's response had shifted something. The students saw their teacher in a new light, his authority tarnished by his inability to justify his actions. As the lesson resumed, Alana sat back in her chair. Her hands were trembling, but she felt a surge of pride swelling in her chest. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time, the weight of the room didn't feel like a burden. It felt like power. The bell rang, signaling the end of the class, but the air in the room was still heavy with tension. As the students packed up their books and filed out, some avoided looking at Alana altogether, while others cast her curious glances. Whispers rippled through the hallway as the story of what had happened began to spread. Alana walked toward her next class, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. She couldn't shake the mix of emotions swirling inside her. Pride for standing up for herself, anger at being singled out, and a gnawing worry about what would happen next. Would Mr. Reardon retaliate? Would the other teachers find out? By lunch, it seemed everyone had heard. As Alana entered the cafeteria, she felt dozens of eyes on her. She kept her head high, clutching her lunch tray as she made her way to her usual table in the corner. Her friends, Layla and Jasmine, were already there, their faces lit with excitement. "Alana!" Layla leaned forward, her voice a loud whisper. "Did you really say that to Reardon? Everyone's talking about it." Jasmine shook her head, a grin spreading across her face. "Girl, you're a legend. He deserved it. The way he talks to people, it's about time someone put him in his place." Alana gave a small smile as she sat down, though her hands still trembled slightly. "I don't know if I'm a legend," she said quietly. "I couldn't sit there and let him talk to me like that." "Good," Jasmine said, her voice firm. "He's been pulling this for years, always making those snide comments, always acting like he's above everyone. But you shut him down." Layla nodded. "Do you think he's going to try to get back at you?" Alana hesitated. "I don't know. But even if he does, I'm not going to apologize for what I said. Someone had to say it." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of a classmate, James, who slid into the seat across from Alana. He was one of the more outspoken students in school, known for his confidence and sharp tongue. "Alana," he said, grinning. "That was epic. The way you called Reardon out. I wish I had that kind of nerve." Alana raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I guess." "No, seriously," James continued, his tone more earnest. "You said what we've all been thinking. He's always crossing the line, but no one ever says anything. You made him look like a fool today." Alana didn't respond right away. She wasn't sure how she felt about being at the center of this much attention, but she could see that her words had resonated with her classmates in a way she hadn't anticipated. By the end of the day, the confrontation had become the talk of the school. Some students approached Alana in the hallways, offering quiet words of support or asking her to recount the moment. Others avoided her entirely, unsure of where they stood. Even a few teachers seemed to look at her differently, though whether it was in admiration or disapproval, Alana couldn't tell. But not everyone was supportive. As Alana gathered her things from her locker, she overheard two students talking just a few feet away. "She just wanted attention," one of them muttered. "Always playing the race card." Alana froze, her hands gripping the edge of her locker door. The sting of their words was sharp, cutting through the confidence she'd worked so hard to muster. She wanted to turn around, to confront them, but something stopped her. Instead, she took a deep breath, trying to remind herself of what mattered. As she walked home that afternoon, Alana replayed the day in her mind. For every voice of support, there was another that dismissed her actions or accused her of making a scene. It was exhausting, but she couldn't let it break her resolve. Later that evening, as she sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, her mother walked in. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, placing a hand on Alana's shoulder. "How was school today?" Alana hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell her mother everything. She recounted the lesson, Mr. Reardon's comments, and her decision to speak up. As she spoke, her mother's expression shifted from concern to pride. "You did the right thing," her mother said firmly. Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when it comes to something as serious as racism. But you were brave, and I'm proud of you." Alana felt a lump form in her throat. "What if he tries to get me in trouble?" she asked quietly. "Then we'll deal with it," her mother said. "You don't have to face this alone, and if the school doesn't take it seriously, I will. No one has the right to treat you like that, not even a teacher." Hearing her mother's words gave Alana a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to relax, knowing she had her family's support. That night, as she lay in bed, Alana thought about the courage it had taken to speak up, and the responsibility she now felt to keep standing her ground. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she knew one thing for sure: she wouldn't let herself be silenced. The next morning, Alana arrived at school bracing for whatever might come. As she walked through the hallways, she could feel the stares again, some filled with admiration, others laced with judgment. The air buzzed with a strange energy, and it wasn't long before she learned why. "Did you hear?" Jasmine said as she caught up with Alana near her locker. "Mr. Reardon was called into the principal's office this morning." Alana's heart skipped a beat. "What? Why?" Jasmine shrugged but smirked knowingly. "Come on, you know why. Someone must have told them about what happened yesterday. Word spreads fast in this school." Alana felt a mix of emotions: relief that someone had taken notice, but also a creeping anxiety about what this might mean for her. She had no idea who might have reported the incident, and part of her wondered if she'd be called in next. Her question was answered just before lunch, when an office aide appeared at the door of her math class. "Alana Johnson," the aide said, holding a slip of paper. "The principal wants to see you." The room fell silent as Alana gathered her things, her classmates exchanging whispers and curious glances. She walked to the office with her stomach in knots, replaying every moment of yesterday's confrontation in her mind. When she arrived, Principal Howard, a tall woman with a calm, authoritative presence, gestured for her to come in and have a seat. Mr. Reardon was already there, his arms crossed and his face set in a scowl. "Alana," Principal Howard began, her voice even, "I've been made aware of an incident in Mr. Reardon's class yesterday. I'd like to hear your side of the story." Alana hesitated, glancing at Mr. Reardon, whose expression didn't soften. She took a deep breath and began recounting the events of the lesson: the question he asked, the way he singled her out, and the comment about her race. She left nothing out, even as she felt her voice waver slightly under the weight of the memory. When she finished, Principal Howard turned to Mr. Reardon. "Is this accurate?" Mr. Reardon shifted uncomfortably. "I may have been a bit direct," he admitted, "but I was trying to engage the class in a meaningful discussion. If Alana felt singled out, that wasn't my intention." Alana's chest tightened at his dismissive tone. "It wasn't just about how I felt," she said, her voice firming. "You made a racist comment, and you embarrassed me in front of the whole class. That's not engaging, it's harmful." Principal Howard nodded thoughtfully, leaning back in her chair. "Mr. Reardon, we've had conversations before about maintaining sensitivity in the classroom. This is a serious concern, and it's not the first time I've received complaints about your teaching methods." Mr. Reardon's face reddened. "With all due respect, I'm just trying to challenge my students to think critically." "At the expense of their dignity?" Principal Howard interrupted. Her tone remained calm, but her words were sharp. "That's not how we foster a respectful learning environment." Alana sat quietly as the principal continued, feeling both vindicated and slightly overwhelmed. "Alana," Principal Howard said, turning her attention back to her, "I want to thank you for bringing this to light. It takes a lot of courage to speak up, especially in situations like this. If there's anything else you'd like to share, my door is always open." Alana nodded, her heart still racing as she left the office. As much as she appreciated the principal's support, she couldn't ignore the tension radiating from Mr. Reardon. She knew this wasn't over. That afternoon, the ripple effects continued to grow. During her final class of the day, a student she barely knew, Marcus, leaned over to whisper, "Hey, I heard what you did. That was brave." Alana gave him a small smile. "Thanks." "Seriously," Marcus said. "Reardon's been a jerk for years. You're the first person to call him out. You've got guts." After school, Alana found a note slipped into her locker. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "Thank you for speaking up. You made me feel like I'm not alone." Alana read the note twice, her throat tightening. She wasn't sure who had written it, but knowing her actions had touched someone else gave her a deep sense of purpose. That evening, as Alana sat at her desk doing homework, her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Check your email. You've got to see this." Alana opened her laptop and pulled up her inbox. Jasmine had forwarded her a screenshot of a post from a popular student-run social media account. It read, "Shout out to Alana Johnson for standing up to Reardon's racism. This school needs more people like her." The post already had dozens of likes and comments, most of them positive, though a few hinted at backlash. Finally, someone called him out. Reardon's been a problem for years. About time someone said something. Not everything is about race. People are too sensitive these days. Alana closed her laptop with a sigh. The outpouring of support was encouraging, but the negative comments stung. No matter how hard she tried, it seemed like some people would always twist her actions into something they weren't. Her mother knocked on her door and stepped in, a soft smile on her face. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Alana said. "It's just a lot." Her mother sat on the edge of the bed. "Standing up for what's right is never easy, but look at what you've done, Alana. You've started a conversation that needed to happen. Don't let the negativity drown out the good you've accomplished." Alana nodded, letting her mother's words sink in. She realized she wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. She was standing up for others who felt silenced, and that was worth the struggle. Over the next few days, Alana's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. Her confrontation with Mr. Reardon had ignited a spark that couldn't be extinguished. It was no longer just a classroom moment. It had become a catalyst for something bigger. During lunch, students she barely knew stopped by her table to voice their support. Some shared their own stories of feeling silenced or dismissed, while others admitted they wished they'd had the courage to speak up in the past. But not everyone was supportive. A small but vocal group of students, and even some parents, argued that Alana had overreacted. They claimed she had taken Mr. Reardon's comments out of context, or worse, accused her of trying to cause trouble. One morning, as Alana walked to her first class, she noticed a group of students whispering by the lockers. One of them sneered as she passed. "Guess we can't say anything without someone pulling the race card," he said loudly, making sure Alana could hear. She paused for a moment, her heart pounding, but decided not to engage. She had learned over the past few days that not every battle was worth fighting. Meanwhile, Principal Howard had taken decisive action. She held a staff meeting to discuss the incident, emphasizing the importance of sensitivity and respect in the classroom. Mr. Reardon was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, a decision that sent shockwaves through the school. For Alana, it was a bittersweet victory. On one hand, she felt validated. Her voice had been heard, and the school was taking her complaint seriously. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. She had never intended to disrupt the school or put herself at the center of so much controversy. That evening, the phone rang. Her mother answered and handed it to Alana. "It's Principal Howard," she said, her tone calm but serious. Alana hesitated, then took the phone. "Hello?" "Alana, this is Principal Howard. I wanted to update you on the situation with Mr. Reardon. He'll be out for the rest of the semester while we complete our review. In the meantime, we're bringing in a substitute teacher for your class." "Okay," Alana said quietly. I also wanted to let you know that we're organizing a school-wide assembly next week, Principal Howard continued. It will focus on diversity, inclusion, and the importance of respectful dialogue. I think it's a good opportunity to address some of the underlying issues we've seen at our school. Alana felt a mix of emotions. She appreciated the effort, but the idea of standing in front of the entire school to relive the incident made her stomach churn. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Well," Principal Howard said, "I was hoping you might share your experience. It doesn't have to be a speech, just a few words about why you spoke up and what it meant to you." Alana hesitated. She hated public speaking, and the thought of putting herself out there even more made her nervous. But she also knew the power of her voice. "I'll think about it," she said. The day of the assembly arrived faster than Alana expected. As she stood backstage, her hands trembled slightly, clutching the index cards she had written the night before. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled with students, teachers, and even a few parents. Principal Howard stepped up to the microphone first, delivering an opening speech about the importance of creating an inclusive and supportive school environment. Then she introduced Alana. The applause was polite but subdued as Alana walked to the podium. She took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces. "Good morning," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "My name is Alana Johnson, and I'm here today to talk about something that happened in my history class last week. It's not easy to stand up here and relive it, but I think it's important." She paused, steadying herself. "When my teacher singled me out and made a comment about my race, I felt embarrassed and humiliated. But more than that, I felt angry. Angry because this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me, or to people like me." The room was silent, every eye fixed on Alana. I decided to speak up, not just for myself, but for anyone who's ever felt like their voice didn't matter, and I want you to know, it does matter. We all have a responsibility to call out injustice when we see it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "This isn't just about one teacher or one comment. It's about creating a school where everyone feels respected and valued, no matter their race, their background, or who they are. And that's something we all have to work on, together." When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Alana felt a surge of relief and pride as she stepped away from the podium, her cheeks flushed. In the weeks that followed, the school began to change. The assembly sparked important conversations among students and teachers alike. Workshops on diversity and inclusion were implemented, and a student-led group was formed to address issues of racism and bias in the school community. As for Alana, she became an unlikely leader. Students who had once ignored her now sought her out for advice, or simply to thank her for her courage. Even teachers began to see her in a new light, treating her with a newfound respect. And while there were still moments of pushback, whispers in the hallways, the occasional side-eye, Alana knew she had done something meaningful. One afternoon, as she walked home from school, she noticed a younger student trailing behind her. He hesitated, then called out, "Alana?" She turned, smiling gently. "Yeah?" "I just wanted to say, thanks," he said shyly, "for what you did. It made me feel like maybe I can speak up too." Alana felt her chest swell with pride. "You can," she said, "and if you ever need someone to back you up, I'm here." As the boy smiled and walked away, Alana realized that her story wasn't just about one moment in a classroom. It was about creating a ripple effect, a movement that started with her voice and grew into something far bigger. And that, she knew, was just the beginning.